Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 17 of my How to Make Android Apps tutorial series. And today I'm going to focus in on onSaveInstanceState, Shared Preferences, and Preference Manager. And over the course of the next couple tutorials, I'm going to cover all of the things that I haven't covered previously. So, why don't we jump over and take a look at the finished product so you'll know what you're going to get. Okay, so you see our little simple application here, and what we're going to be able to do is come in here and enter any type of note, and this information is going to be saved. And then first off, what I'm going to use is the saved instance state, and you're going to see that if the orientation changes or if Android forces this guy to close, that it's going to stay there. However, would be lost if the user would say go in there and force close the application, but since we're going to be using something called shared preferences, we're actually going to be able to keep it even if the user force closes. And you can also see here with the preference manager in a separate screen, I'm going to be able to change the text to bold as well as also go in and change the text size. So there are three different ways for us to interact and save data. Let's go and make the app now. Okay, so you saw the application, pretty simple, but this is very important to understand how all three of these guys work. So what we're going to have here are 5 files. We're going to have activity my, just like always. We're going to have a strings file. We're going to have myActivity.java. We're going to have preferences.xml, which is going to show or define the layout for our preferences slide. We're going to have an arrays section, and we're going to have settings activity, which is also going to handle the preferences. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into activitymy.xml and specifically into the design section, and I'm just going to throw a couple of little things inside of here just like you previously saw. So I'm going to get a plain text view and just drop that in there anywhere. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to give this the name notes text view and bounce out of there, and then I'm going to put a multi-line editable text box inside of here. So come over here, multi-line text, and let's just drag it and drop it in here somewhere. And there we go. And then come over here and give it the ID of notes edit text. Good enough. Then I'm going to jump over into the text area and define a couple things. Let's have our text view that we have inside of here. Let's call this notes. Let's define our text size, and let's make this 20 SP, and everything else here is pretty good. Then we'll have our editable text box, and if we want to have it have a certain number of lines, we just come in here and do lines, and let's say I want to have a maximum of 6 lines, or I want to define that I want 6 lines to show. If I actually want to show the maximum lines, I can do that as well, and let's just say that I define both of those as 6. And then let's say that I also want to come in here and put a hint so that it'll tell me roughly, what we want inside of here. So I'm going to use the hint, enter notes, just to keep that simple, and then whenever they click on it, it'll go away. That's the way the hints work. And then I'm going to throw a little settings button inside of here as well, just like you saw previously. Let's come back over here to this guy, and let's change this to match parent. Go. Jump back over into the design section, and now we're going to throw a button in here, and let's just drag it down here so it's out of the way. Jump back inside of this, and we can change the name for this to button settings. And the text for this, let's also set that to settings. Now, of course, we're going to be able to come in here to the text section and save this to strings.xml. Come over here to the little light ball, click on that, and let's give this the resource name of notes text view. Good enough. And let's do the same thing for the editable text area. Enter notes. Let's just come in here and get this little light bulb, extract string resource, and we can call this notes edit text. Click OK. And then finally for our button with the settings area here, go in and do the same thing. Now we got all that out of the way, and the layout is all done. Another thing we want to do is let's make this text go up here a little bit. And to do that, we just go gravity and set that for top. And I don't know if you saw that, but now it's over here, it's at the top. Okay, so now we have the design set up. Now let's go into myActivity.java and set everything else up. Now the first thing we're going to do is create references to our edit text box so that we'll be able to change things in there. And let's just call this notes edit text. Also going to need the button because we're going to be triggering events whenever the button is clicked on, so button settings. And then we're also going to come in here and define this guy, which is going to be a final, and this is how we're going to be able to track what activity calls for an intent to execute. You're going to see here in a little bit exactly what that's going to look like, so just want to get that out of the way. Come down here and on create, and let's initialize our editable text box. So notes edit text is equal to edit text, and then of course find view by ID, and then that's r.id. And then notes edit text. That's why I like to have these have the same name, but it's up to you what you want to do. Now, as you can see here, saved instance state was passed in. Now, what this is, it's a bundle, and all a bundle is a bunch of key value pairs. So there's going to be a key assigned to a value. That's all that is. So if we want to be able to make sure that data is saved if the orientation of the device changes or if the Android operating system decides to shut down our activity, what we're going to do is we're going to save data that we want to keep saved in this saved instance state bundle. It's pretty simple. So what we're going to do is, first off, before we try to get data for saved instance state, we're going to first check if there is data inside of it. So we're going to instance state, saved instance state, and we're going to check that it's not equal to null. In the situation in which it is not, well, then we know that we have some data here that we're going to be able to get. So I'm going to get it, and I'm going to save it in a string called notes. And how we get data that is stored inside of here is we call saved instance state, and then we go get string, because that's what we're trying to get, and it is going to have the keyword of notes. In a second here, you're going to see exactly how you save stuff inside of this bundle. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go notes, edit text, this guy right here, and I'm going to set the text to whatever was saved previously. And I'm just going to send the string there, and that is all we're going to need to do. Now what we need to do is come down here and actually create onSavedInstanceState. And I'm just going to right click, and I'm going to go generate, and I'm going to say override methods. onSavedInstanceState is right there, and there it is created. Now, like I said before, this method is going to be called anytime the operating system decides to kill the application. This does not save you if the user tries to kill the application. We're going to handle that in a moment. But it does save you if Android tries to kill the application, and also it's going to protect you if there is an orientation change. Now, to save a value to a key, all we're going to do is we're going to go out state, which is passed inside of here, and we're going to say put string. We're going to define a key, which is notes, just like you saw a moment ago where I was using the key to get the data. And then I'm going to go notes, edit text, whatever was stored inside of here. I'm going to get that text. I'm going to convert it to a string, and I'm going to save it as the value that is assigned to notes, which is the key. And that's all I need to do. Now I'm able to be protected if Android shuts down my app or if the orientation changes. But you may ask yourself, well, how are we going to save our data if the user decides to shut down our application? No problem. In this situation, we're going to use shared preferences, which are just key value pairs. Once again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a method. I'm going to call it save settings. Right like this, and then I'm going to open up shared preferences, and then specifically I'm going to call for the editor, and we're going to define here exactly how this data is going to be saved and who's going to be able to get a hold of it. So I'm going to call this SP editor, shared preferences editor is equal to, I'm going to go get preferences, and then I have to define exactly who is going to have access to the key valued pairs, and I'm going to make it private, which basically means my application only. And then whenever I put edit on here, this is going to allow us to enter key valued pairs, right like that. Now we have mode private, which is most commonly used. There are a couple other different ones, actually two other ones. You have mode world readable, and that means anybody's going to be able to read your data. And then we have mode world writable, which means anybody's going to be able to write to your data. But you're almost never going to use those, so let's just leave those out for now. Now in this situation, if I want to be able to save my notes just like I did previously, I'm just going to call the editor, and I'm going to say that I want to put a string inside of here with the key notes. And then what I do is I just come down here and I just go notes, edit text, and I get the text just like I did previously, and of course convert it to a string. And that is how easy it is to save to shared preferences. And then finally, after you do that, you have to commit your changes, editor, and commit. And there we go. Now specifically how this is going to be called, this method we just created, is if the application is forced closed by the user. Now how do we know whenever the application is forced closed by the user? Well, a method is going to be called, which we're going to override. So we're just coming in here again and generate and override methods. And specifically we're going to look for onStop. And there is onStop right there. And there it is. Now whenever onStop is called, because the application's been forced closed, we're then going to call save settings, which is the method that we just created. And it's going to save everything for us. Pretty easy. So now all we need to do is go up into onCreate, and whenever the application is reopened, even though that data is saved, we want to go in and get it. We want to retrieve it from shared preferences. So to do so, I'm just going to go string, and I'm going to call this SP notes, shared preferences notes. And if I want to get my shared preferences, I just go get preferences. Again, going to define how I'm going to get this information. Mode private, get string, and then specifically I say notes is what I want. That is the key. Go down to the next line. And then if I want to define something if nothing was retrieved, so that I can check to make sure that if nothing was retrieved, I can do something else. Let's just say empty is going to be passed otherwise. And then what I can do is I can go if not spNotes equals empty. Well, then I know that I was able to retrieve something from there. And in that situation, I can put the proper text back into it. Call the editable text, set text, and then put that string inside of there. So that's going to save that data even though the application was forced closed by the user. And now what we're going to do is we're going to define that preferences screen that you saw whenever the person clicked on settings. And to do that, we're going to go into preferences.xml. This is pretty cool. We're going to come in here and we are first off going to create a checkbox preference. And just so you know where all this stuff lives, let's come over here and look at it real quick. Preferences.xml needs to be in the XML folder. If it isn't in there, you need to create an XML folder and then put preferences.xml inside of there. Of course, strings is here just like always. Arrays we're going to be creating here in a second. And that is basically everything else. Of course, all of your other layout files are going to be in the layout folder. So checkbox preference, and this is going to allow them to check whether they want the text to be bold or not. So what we're going to do is define a key for this, and I'm going to give this the name of preferences text bold, and this is, if it's going to be checked, it's going to make all the text bold inside of the editable text box, and you can store tons of things inside of there. Also going to give this a title, and that title is going to be make text bold. We could save that in strings.xml, but no, I'm not going to do that for right now. And then you have the little summary, which basically defines what it's going to do, and I'm just going to call this makes the note text bold. And we use things like this because they look like Androids, and we want to make sure that everything looks the same. And then by default, we're going to say that the checkbox is not going to be checked. Now, if we want to do a little list preference, first off, I'm going to go into arrays.xml and define what's going to be in my list. And you're actually going to define the entries, which is going to be what shows on the screen, as well as the values. So I'm going to create a string array, and I'm going to give it the name of text size entries. And then for each of the little parts inside of here, we're just going to call them item. And let's say I want to put 16 points and make another item inside of here. And this one's going to be 18 points. And then let's take this up to 20, and let's take this to 22, and there we go. Now we're going to create another string array inside of here. Again, this is going to be used inside of preferences.xml. This is going to be for our list. You can, of course, click back to the beginning of the video and see exactly what it looks like. And I'm going to call this text size values. And this is where the actual value is going to be stored, and that's just going to be this minus the point part. Got rid of that. File save, and that's all set up. Now back inside of here, and we're going to define our list that's going to open up for us. And again, we're going to give it a key, and in this situation I'm going to call this preference text size, and then I'm going to give it a title, and I'm just going to call it text size summary, pick the text size, and then the entries, which is what's going to show up in the list, is going to be in the arrays. So we're going to go array like that, and then this is going to be text size entries, which is this guy right here. See, text size entries. And this is going to be text size values. This is going to be the next one we work with. And to put the actual values, we're going to go entry values. And again, it's going to be array and then text size values. And then if we want to define a default that we're going to use for our list preference, let's say it's 16. And close that off, and that is going to be the layout for the preferences folder that opens up when I click on settings. So that's pretty neat. And now we're going to go and create settingsActivity.java, and what this is going to do is it's going to load up that layout that you just saw there on the screen whenever that settings button's clicked on. Feels like I'm repeating myself. Now to make this work, we're going to have to extend PreferenceActivity for this guy, and then I want this to be backwards compatible, and this way of doing things has actually been deprecated, but to be backwards compatible I actually want to use it. So if I want to suppress the deprecation errors, I'm just going to go suppress warnings like that, and I'm going to go deprecation right like that, and then it'll get rid of any weird errors that we have. And then to define the XML file that I want to use here, I'm just going to go add preferences from resource, that guy right there, and then I'm going to point at the layout folder or file that I just created. And there we go. There it is. Okay, now that we have all that set up, now I can go back into my activity.java and make all that stuff work. First thing I'm going to do, I'm still inside of onCreate, and I'm just going to continue here where I left off. Come down here, and I'm going to have to initialize the button. So button settings, there it is equal to, of course, I have to say it's a button. Find view by ID, r.id dot button settings. That's initialized. Then I have to handle if the button is clicked. And basically what's going to happen if the button is clicked, it's going to create an intent to open up our settings activity class, which we just created here a second ago. So button settings dot set on click listener. I'm going to go new view dot, and you can see on click listener opens up there. Just click on that, and there it is all on the screen. Then we're going to say if that button is clicked on, we want to define our intention to open up that preferences activity. Intent preferences is what I'll call it, equal to new. Define the new intent, pass in the context, get application context, and then define exactly what we want to open, which is going to be settings activity, which is the class we're going to open, and that's settings activity. That's this guy right here. We're going to open this up, and it's going to open the layout up, and everything's going to work. So that's what we're doing there. And now that we defined that, we just need to start our activity, and then we're also going to want any changes made in that activity, such as making the text bold or changing the point size of the text, to be passed back. So whenever you want stuff to be passed back after an activity's been fired, we're going to go to start activity, and then we're going to go for result. We expect a result to be passed back. And then we just pass in the intent preferences right like that. And then settings info is going to also be passed in. See, settings info, and this is going to be passed in so that we know what intent actually fired back to our onActivityResult method whenever the intent finished. You're going to see here in a second. So we're just going to put settings info, and then we'll know which intent fired here. Down here, because remember, after this intent is executed, we are then going to get our, whether the text should be bold or whether it should be a certain point size, passed back. And where that's passed back to, we're going to have to override a method. And let's do protected void on activity result. This is the method called, and we're going to get a request code that's going to be passed inside of here. We're also going to get a result code and an intent of the intent data that we need. Make a call to the superclass on activity result, and we're going to pass in the request code, the result code, and the data to that guy. And then we're going to check that settings info was actually passed here so that we know where this is coming from. And this is normally going to be used whenever you have numerous different intents that could be calling this after they execute. So we're going to say if request code that was passed is equal to settings info. Well, in that situation, we know which one's coming and we know what method to call. So it's going to be update note text, which is going to be created next. So just come on down here right after this is done. Let's make this private void, update note text. Nothing's passed to it. And this guy's just going to be responsible for updating the text changes in the editable text box that was set in the preferences pane. So to get that, we're going to go shared preferences. Just call this shared preferences just to keep it simple. And all of your keyed value pairs are going to be stored inside of this. To get a hold of them, you're going to call the preference manager and then get default shared preferences and pass this in. And there we go. And let's get rid of this extra little guy. There it is. And now we're going to check if the bold checkbox was clicked on. And how you do that is go if shared preferences. If we want to get a Boolean, which is what that is, it's either on or off, just go get Boolean. And then specifically, we're going to look for preference text bold, pass in false. And that, of course, is going to come from preferences.xml right here. We're going to check if this is true or false, or if it's checked or not, back over here. And in this situation, it would be set for true that it was checked. So we're going to go notes edit text. And if we want to change it to bold, set typeface, null, and then call typeface. And let's do bold or bold italic. Just let it bold. It doesn't matter either way, whatever you want to use. Else, if it isn't checked, well, then we want to make it normal. And then just change this to normal. And that's going to allow us to change it from bold to normal back and forth with just that little checkbox. Next thing we want to check is if they change the size of the text. So we're going to create a string, and I'm going to call it text size str for string. Again, if you want to, in this situation, get a string from that guy, we're going to go shared preferences and get string instead of get Boolean like we did before. And specifically, we want the preference text size to be retrieved, and once again that's in preferences XML, preference text size, this guy right here, and we can define a default for this, as 16. Now we need to convert that string into a float, so text size float, so that we can use it to actually change the text size. Parse float, and then let's just pass in the text size string. And then to change the text size for notes edit text, we go set text size and then put in the float value. And there we go. And there you go, guys. There's our 3 different ways to save your data inside of your Android application, as well as how to use shared preferences and a whole bunch of other different things. Of course, just like always, all of the code is available in a link in the description underneath the video, and please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.